Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to our 5th Universal Meals listening session. And on behalf of the entire Nutrition Services Division team, I want to wish everyone a very happy National School Breakfast Week. And I sincerely hope that your celebrations are taking off with so much fun, student and staff engagement, and very delicious, nutritious breakfast creations that are absolutely out of this world. And we would love to see your photos posted, so please do send those to us. And I wish that I could provide all of you with some snacks and beverages today, but I can't. We are still remote, but I'll invite you to sit back and enjoy our 90-minute universal meal session today. In addition, we have a standing segment in our universal meal listening sessions of frequently asked questions that we've collected throughout the month. And we are making those a standing agenda item each time so we can share those as well as we are posting those on our website. And then, as always, we want to make sure that you have as much information as possible and kind of at your fingertips. So please do make sure to check out our previous listening sessions on Universal Meals. Those recordings are being posted to our webpage. And in addition, we have a Universal Meals mailbox. We are developing web pages with additional resources, and we're collecting those frequently asked questions and posting those as well. We're updating trainings and policy guidance all around the implementation of the California Universal Meals. And I hope you've all downloaded from CNIPS the 16 School Nutrition Program resource guides to help you with your school operations. So please take advantage of those. And probably one of the best resources available to you is your county specialists. They are there to help provide you with one-on-one, very specific technical assistance. So please reach out to them for any support or questions that you may have. And then, I just want to stress it's so important that we all stay connected during this transition, and we are committed to continuing to provide you with the information that we have as well as the best practices. So today, we will feature Gurjeet and Becca from our school teams, as well as some of your colleagues to help highlight some of those best practices. So we have Holly Hungerford Cockings from River Springs Charter School and Kristen Hilleman from Capistrano Unified School District. Again, these conversations are incredibly valuable, and I think it's so important that you hear from your peers throughout the state how they are dealing with some of these challenges and thinking through the implementation of universal meals. It's better when you have real life examples, so we hope that you find these very valuable. We fully understand that every school is very different. There is not a cookie cutter approach to the implementation of universal meals, and that is why it's really important that we share how different schools, different sizes, different styles are choosing to implement universal meals so that we can all learn from each other, realizing that there are just different challenges for all of you. So today's focus is really on small school districts and those that are not currently participating in our National School Lunch and School Breakfast program. So on our agenda for today, we'll be providing a very brief overview of universal meals. I think you all understand what the components are of that, but it's important that we kind of revisit that each time. We will also be sharing options for applying for and operating the National School Lunch School Breakfast program. And we will be discussing how schools can procure services such as a food service management company contract, if that's an option for administering the National School Lunch School Breakfast program, working with another school district, and again, sharing those real life strategies from your peers. And then we will follow up with going over our frequently asked questions. And then as time allows, we'll be able to hopefully address some of the questions that are coming through chat today. So as you know, there are 3 main components to the universal meal programs that we will all be implementing in the new school year. And that includes, it's an update to the current state meal mandate. So all children, regardless of their eligibility, will have access to 1 breakfast, 1 lunch each school day. There's also a provision that requires schools that are defined as high poverty apply for community eligibility provision or provision 2. And then it also stipulates that in order to receive the state reimbursement for universal meals, schools must be on the National School Lunch and School Breakfast Program. So all public school districts, county offices of education, charter schools are providing a breakfast and a lunch each school day to all students requesting a meal, regardless of their free or reduced priced eligibility status. So with that, there's lots of opportunities, as I mentioned, no cookie cutter approach, but there's lots of opportunities for supporting this. So Gurjit's going to walk through and kind of navigate the options for participating in our program. So take it away, Gurjit.
Thanks so much, Kim. So as Kim kind of just described, and as we've discussed in some previous listening sessions, the California Universal Meals Program is really designed to build upon the foundation of the federal school nutrition programs. And there are really two ways that local agencies can participate. The first option is to become a program sponsor. And then if sponsorship seems like it might be something that's a little bit too daunting to start, another option is to participate as a site under an existing sponsor. And today I'll start kind of by just focusing on what sponsorship means and what it looks like in the lens of school nutrition programs. So in a nutshell, becoming a sponsor means that you're not only responsible for providing those nutritionally adequate meals to your students, it also means that you're going to handle the administrative responsibilities of the program, such as student eligibility and submitting claims for reimbursement, just kind of at the highest levels. Sponsoring agencies, have the ability to determine how they're going to procure their meals, and they're responsible for all of the sites that participate under their administration. So a common example of what a sponsor may look like could be a public school district, that is supporting their school district's school sites. In other instances, we may see county offices of education that support school sites for multiple school districts. And in other examples, we might even see school districts that support charter schools or private schools that are outside of the realm of their district. And I believe Kristen's going to talk about her experience in doing that later on today. But first, let's take a look at what it takes to become a sponsor. So there are a few criteria the local education agencies must meet in order to participate in the federal school nutrition programs. And first and foremost, USDA requires that any local education agency be considered a nonprofit entity. And they specify that, meaning that you're exempt from income taxes under 501c3 of the IRS code. There's really no way around that. In addition to that requirement, there are some other eligibility requirements that are really dependent upon the type of LEA. So naturally, related to that 501c3 requirement, all public schools and county offices of education are nonprofit entities. And so that, they are eligible to participate as a sponsor in the school nutrition programs. For charter schools that want to participate as a sponsor, they simply need to be active in the California Department of Education Charter Schools Division, so the CDS school directory. But in order to be a sponsor, a charter school must also be a directly funded charter school. For charter schools to confirm that nonprofit status, we do require that they submit a copy of that 501c3 letter from the IRS. Historically, we've heard from some charter schools that sometimes getting a copy of that letter can be lengthy. So if you're a charter and you're interested in being a sponsor, it's wise to request that IRS letter now if you don't already have a copy on hand. Once you've made that decision, hey, I'm ready, I want to join the program as a sponsor, our staff will work to confirm your eligibility and get you started on the process. First, we'll have you submit a couple simple forms to obtain a vendor number, which is basically the the most simple requirement for the Department of Education to be able to pay claims for reimbursement. We will assign you a program specialist who will help to create a sponsor profile for you in our child nutrition and information payment system. That's our database that we often refer to as CNIPS. And within CNIPS is where you're going to do a lot of the application and information submission. So information about your sponsor operations, about your sites will be submitted there. You'll use CNIPS to submit claims for reimbursement. In addition to that CNIPS application, we'll also have you submit other documents to make sure that you really are ready to run the program. So, so those documents will include menu certification packets. You'll have to have health permits for the school sites that you wish to operate at, and then any vendor or food service management company contracts that you might be using in your operations. Once all of those forms have been submitted, we've approved those menus, you've completed your application in CNIPS, our staff will conduct kind of a final review of all those documents and give you that stamp of approval to begin operations. One of the real common questions that we get is, how long does this process take? And my simple answer to that question is always, it depends. It really varies greatly and is driven by the local operator. We've had sponsors that have gone through the process and been approved as quickly as 6 weeks. But generally the process does take a couple of months in order to complete everything. I mentioned briefly, each site has to have a health permit. And so some of these pieces, they do take time to process because it's outside of the realm of just CDE and the local operator. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor, the first step that you need to take is to contact our team. We'll assign you with an analyst who can start you through that process. You can reach out to our team using that email box that's on the slide there, snp.info@cde.ca.gov. But we also have a link that will drop into the chat to our county analyst directory. So we have staff that are assigned to each county in the state that can help to walk you through and guide you through the application process. Now you're probably thinking, well, Gurjeet, participation is one thing, but what about the meals? And particularly for small schools that don't have kitchen facilities, we know that preparing meals on site, it may not be possible. Fortunately, there are some options out there for those of you who are in these situations. Vending meals or contracting with a food service management company are some options that you can utilize to get those meals to your students. In the school nutrition programs world, vending meals essentially means that one party is selling meals to another party. So sponsoring organizations have the flexibility. They can choose to work with a private company or even to vend meals from another existing sponsor. Those meal vendors, they prepare and they deliver meals to sponsors. And in some cases, they're even able to help develop menus and provide menu production records for sponsoring agencies. One of the benefits of working with an existing sponsor on that vended meal agreement is that vending agreements between sponsoring agencies in the school nutrition programs do not require those agencies to follow the traditional bidding process. That's an area where federal regulations have really allowed for some flexibility. If you choose to work with a private company, those vending agreements must be competitively bid, and those procurements must follow all of the federal procurement procedures. So as you get to that point in the process, our staff can certainly walk you through those two options. Now, there are some limitations to the role that a meal vendor can play. When vending meals, the vendor really is responsible just for that piece, providing the meal itself. Those other program activities, those do remain the responsibility of the sponsor. So some examples of activities that a meal vendor cannot take over include accessing individual student eligibility information, They cannot conduct your point of service meal counts. They can't provide program oversight. They're not to collect claim data, and they're not, they can't really act as an employee of the sponsor. If you're in a situation where you're really looking for more support than just what a meal vendor can provide, that's an instance where you may want to consider working with a food service management company. And I'm going to turn it over to Becca Shupp, who's going to speak more about how sponsors can use food service management companies to support their operations in school nutrition programs. Becca?
Thanks, Gurjeet. So a food service management company, or an FSMC, is a commercial enterprise or a nonprofit organization which is or may be contracted with by an SFA to manage any aspect of the school food service operation. So contracting with an FSMC is just another option for sponsors that may not have the capacity to manage their own nutrition program. So those smaller school districts, individual sites, maybe limited staffing, or kitchen facilities, this might be a good route for you. So a company is considered an FSMC if it performs all or a combination of the services that we have listed actually on these next two slides. So they may provide consulting services, develop menus and menu production records, prepare, deliver, and even serve the meals. They may organize and maintain program documents such as your daily meal counts, menus, and menu production records. And then they may also prepare the claims for you, the SFA, to approve and submit, purchase food, supplies, and/or equipment, provide program guidance and training, maintain your bookkeeping records, and really, conduct any other activities that would normally be performed by the SFA. So if you think working with an FSMC is the route you wish to take, it's important to note that FSMC contracts must be obtained through a competitive bidding process using either formal or informal bidding procedures. All bid documents must be submitted to the CDE's Procurement Resources Unit for approval prior to issuance. Federal regulation does require that FSMC contracts be no longer than 1 year, and the initial contract can include an option to renew for no more than 4 additional 1-year terms. The CDE does have a sample contract available in the CNIPS download forms, and that resource is listed under Form ID PRU07. For a more in-depth overview and just some additional guidance on contracting with an FSMC, please go ahead and visit the CDE's Procurement and School Nutrition Programs webpage. Here you'll find various resources such as the USDA's Contracting with Food Service Management Companies Manual for SFAs, as well as all relevant CDE management bulletins. And we went ahead and go and drop that link in the chat for you right now. So if you want to submit bid documents, or if you have questions related to procurement, you can always contact the Procurement Resources Unit at sfscontracts@cde.ca.gov. And again, we'll go ahead and drop that email address in the chat for you now. Next, we'll kind of dive into just another option for administering the school nutrition programs. So if the idea of being your own independent program sponsor seems a little too daunting, another option that a lot of schools have is to become just a site under an existing sponsoring agency. So over the years, many small sites, charter schools, one school districts have used this as a step to learn kind of the ins and outs of the program before they move on to becoming their own independent sponsor. And really kind of the first step in that process in becoming a site under an existing sponsor is just to contact an LEA in your area who is currently administering the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs, and just ask if they're interested in taking you on as a site. So once you and that sponsoring agency agree to work together, you would be required to have an interagency agreement on file. Under an interagency agreement, the sponsoring agency can provide meals to a school outside of their district. And so while those students are not technically enrolled in the district is still providing them meals and then able to claim them. So basically that sponsoring agency or the district takes on these additional sites and then treats them as if those sites were under their administrative jurisdiction. This means the sponsoring agency would be responsible for providing the meals, submitting the claims, and essentially handling all aspects of really administering the program at your site. It is important to note that while that other district may be handling the administration of the nutrition program at your school, you would still be required to provide a valid health permit for your school site since the meals are being consumed on your campus. So the CDE does recommend that sponsors use our sample interagency agreement, and you can find this in the CNIPS download forms. And then that form itself is listed under Form ID SNP09. But alternatively, sponsors do have the option to develop their own agreement. And if you choose to go this route, that interagency agreement must clearly specify the length of time it's effective and each party's responsibilities. So again, while it's encouraged to use our sample agreement, if you choose to develop your own, that agreement must at a minimum address the point of service meal counts, the management of the free and reduced price meal process, the distribution, review, and approval of meal applications, the verification process, handling of any overclaims identified during reviews or audits, the performance of edit checks, and meal counting and claiming responsibilities. And we do have a management bulletin on this. It's SNP 06-2016. And we'll go ahead and drop that link in the chat for you now, as this is a great resource to kind of, overview this process and what's required. Now I'm actually going to turn it back over to Gurjeet to introduce our panelists.
Thanks, Becca. I wanted to just kind of paint the picture in the way that we set up these listening sessions. And, first we try to provide the state agency perspective, but really it's the local program operators that really bring a lot of the value to these listening sessions. So I'm really excited for our first panelist to join us. We have Holly Hungerford, who's the nutrition director at River Springs Charter School. Holly has a background in nutrition and dietetics and health studies. She has an emphasis in health program planning. She's passionate about creating continually improving access to healthy school meals and really finding creative ways to overcoming barriers to implementation of traditional school meal programs in non-traditional school settings. And Holly really is a great advocate for charter schools and has made a lot of great progress in that realm. So Holly, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Gurjeet. Just because it is today, I'm going to kick off by wishing everybody a wonderful International Women's Day, because we see a lot of women in this field doing this job. Okay, so I have a really unusual situation in school food service. The Springs Charter Schools is actually a network of 6 non-classroom based charters. We service about 10,000 students in 26 different educational models. That's everything from your truly virtual online programs to independent study programs, homeschool with lots of academic support from credentialed teachers, hybrid classroom instructional programs, and we even have 5 sites that have actual seat-based programs. We have 21 facilities in 4 counties, and across our LEAs, the free or reduced eligibility rate ranges from 43% to 71%, with an average across all of them of about 53%. For our school meal programs, we actually operate 3 different school food authorities. 16 of our sites are currently offering 2 meals a day already. The rest are offering 1 meal. 7 of the sites also do an SLP snack. We have 11 sites already that are in CEP. Only 5 of them have warming kitchens or a limited prep food service facility. The rest are all receiving their meals to the site daily, which we'll talk about in a second. In my entire department, I have 20 staff, and we're also currently providing meals to 2 other charter school sites outside of the Springs network. By the time COVID shut us down, we were operating with 6 other charter schools that we were providing the meals for. And we've got kind of an interesting history. So I've only been doing this job for 5 years officially this month. We started our National School Lunch Program in the spring of 2017 in March, when one of the facilities that we were leasing, the owner helped us convert a staff lounge into a really tiny warming kitchen. We went to bid, got a vendor who brought us frozen food that we reheated on site and provided for our kids. It was our first SFA, our first kitchen. And then we slowly started to figure out what we could do next. These kids at this, one site that we started with was a K-8 program. And down the road was the high school where their siblings were, and we couldn't be feeding the little kids and not the high school. So we called up the local district and asked them to provide meals for the high schoolers for us. So Hemet Unified was willing to do that. Janet Jungnickel was a fantastic colleague and partner in that. And we were able to go from just the one site in the spring to by the fall, we had a daily delivery from the school district breakfast and lunch. And then we had 2 more facilities that we managed to bring on in the fall with new kitchens. One thing that we see in charter schools a lot is that we may not own our facilities, we're leasing them, and they might be unusual. It's part of the struggle we have with resources. So in our network, we own a few of the facilities, but not most of them. So we're not going around building kitchens in these facilities that we don't own. By the fall of 2018, we started 2 more school food authorities in our network. One was getting daily delivery from a vendor based out of LA. We realized that if Hemet Unified could bring us food every day, there was no good reason why we couldn't move food around ourselves. So we took one of our kitchens and put some extra storage in it and built up its capacity and started moving food to 4 of our other locations so that we could expand meal programs that way. By 2019, we brought on another kitchen, got 2 more sites up in daily delivery. And then what happened that was really, a catalyst for us was in 2018, California passed AB 1871, which required that charter schools finally provide at least 1 meal every day to students, and that included our NCB schools. So for fall 2019, we had 10 more locations that we had to get up and running with at least 1 meal program by the first day of school. So at that point, we got 1 more kitchen in, we expanded to 7 more sites getting delivery, and 2 more getting delivery from a vendor. As Gurjit kind of went over already, one of the big problems we see with charter schools is just getting started or expansion beyond doing the bare minimum. As Gurjit said, you've got these options for working with another SFA, either as a meal provider or as a site under that SFA, contract a vendor to provide meals, or use an FSMC. One thing that we see less of, but I do see it, is self-op programs, especially in your more rural areas. A vendor is not going to go to Humboldt County and take you meals every day, let alone on a weekly basis bring you frozen food. So self-op programs become, the smaller you are or the more rural you are, figuring those things out yourself and handling all that internal preparation, becomes one of your only options. But again, once you're in a rural area, often you have a stronger community support in your educational system. So your sponsors, your county office is going to offer you more support. You have to ask. You just have to go and ask those people to help you. And then there's a certain degree of creative combination where if you're not going to get, your meals from a vendor or an FSMC, but you want to self-op, but you don't want to self-op the entire thing, find out what you can buy from, another SFA that might be just that thing that you need. Maybe you want to buy just breakfast baked goods, your breakfast entrees every day, but you can handle getting your own milk and your own fruit. Be creative with those combinations. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing situation. It's really easy, especially for charter schools, because the staff are used to wearing so many hats. Fewer students, fewer resources, more consolidated responsibility, but not treating it like an all or nothing approach is one way to reduce the burden of taking on these meal programs or expanding these meal programs. There are a handful of expansion strategies I really like, and I cannot emphasize enough that people should get out of their schools and go visit their neighbors. That includes traditional district school sites, other charter schools in their area. Go visit, go tour, call them, email them, ask them, hey, can I look at what you're doing? It's really easy for us to sit here and talk about what we've done, how we've done it, here's a cute picture. But when you get to go visit somebody in person and see their program and how they're operationally solving these problems and the specific equipment that they're using, that's invaluable, because then you get to start envisioning how that looks in your school sites for your students with your staff that you have. And visit a lot, ask questions, make friends because you need them. This comes in really handy down the line when you want to purchase micro purchase something. We recently, for us, it was an entire pallet of hummus. When you want to purchase something and there's something of district that can normally have the capacity to handle, but you can't, but you still want to get it, then you have people that you can share that cost with. If I want to buy an entire pallet of hummus and I can get somebody to buy half of it off of me, that expands my options for purchasing components for my meal programs. Start small by using cold, shelf-stable, and individually wrapped foods until you build up capacity. We're all worried about space and storage and staffing and the same woes that the districts are right now. And usually we look at those options and it's like, hey, that doesn't make me feel real good, but you have to start somewhere. And one of the things that we've learned in 5 years of doing this is if you start somewhere, the resources come, the money starts coming in, the reimbursements come in, your options for resources increase, and then you have money to put towards solving your problems. Use your commodity entitlements even with your vendors. Negotiate that, make sure they can work that into your contract. At the very least, even if you're a vendor or a vendor that you're using, or if you can't, get it through a broadline distributor, get use of your commodities in the very least by DoD Fresh Produce. For one of our vendors, they will give us a credit on the fruit that we don't purchase for our vended meals that we're getting from Favors or Fresh Produce. And they have a ton of really great options that have helped us expand our menus this year. Anytime the vendors were making substitutions, that we just substitutions over and over again because supply chain has been so difficult for everybody. Be creative with staffing. If you've got, if you started with a lunch program and you're already got your lunch program under control and you don't have enough staff to go up to your breakfast program to get compliant with universal meals, maybe it's a situation where your, staff that handle your lunch are doing that, prepping a cold breakfast for the next day and leaving it for the site staff to handle in the morning. It's a little bit of training, but again, universal meals. So tracking of those meals is so much easier because you don't have to track them by individual student. A little bit of training of the site staff to pull out breakfast in the morning, offer it to the kids, report it, done deal. And you made that happen without having to increase your staff until you're ready to. Maybe if your breakfast program increases really big capacity and then you want a new person or you want to expand your lunch person's FTE to cover breakfast, then you have the resources to do it. We talk a lot about grant funding. Once you're in the federal meal programs, the grant funding opportunities are really great. This will be a tip for my district friends as well. Medi-Cal LEA funds, I think, is underutilized in our programs. If your schools are operating the Medi-Cal reimbursement programs, the Medi-Cal LEA program funds they get reimbursed to the schools for their services are restricted in nature of use, but nutrition services is one of the allowable areas of reinvestment. And find out from your district where their collaborative group, how they function, who they are when they meet, and ask them for some money when you need it. This includes one of the things about Medi-Cal collaborative funds is they're intended for reinvestment in the community. The language isn't specific to children enrolled in a school or a school district, which means they're, even if your charter isn't the school participating in Medi-Cal, but your sponsoring district is, you're still part of their community that they could reinvest that funding in. Take advantage of your micro purchase and small purchase thresholds like crazy. When you're small, you can just spend money in more locations because you're not going to hit those purchasing thresholds that would require more formal procurement strategies. And then, of course, piggyback on other districts' contracts or purchase cooperatively whenever you can. You don't have to go find all of these individual contracts yourself. If you're in the neighborhood of a district or another charter school that has a really good contract, see if you can piggyback on theirs instead of going and getting your own. there are a handful of things that in the last 5 years have really saved us in terms of getting compliant or expanding our programs. And so I have a couple of them. One is vending machines. They're not super attractive in terms of what you can put in them, but you can put some really great cold options in them. And when we were trying to get compliant with AB 1871 and just make that jump to everybody having 1 meal a day, breakfast was the easiest option. And just because we had to start 10 new sites with a breakfast program on the first day of school didn't mean we could have sites staffed trained to do that, all of the resources in place. But when we used a vending machine, the kids served themselves with very little training. All we had to do was have order the machines, get them configured to our POS. We're using Titan, which is how we ended up with this brand because it was configured. Incredibly easy to use. A vendor made the product specifically for us to put in this vending machine. We are using, currently for them, we're using fully unitized breakfast meals with all the components in them. They're a little more expensive than a regular breakfast, but the level of convenience in terms of, set it and forget it, the kids serve themselves and it records in the POS on the back end, super, super convenient. And we didn't have to buy them. We could lease them if we wanted to. Norlake cold lockers. Okay. Space is a problem. Space is a problem for a lot of people right now. But for us, again, with facilities that we often lease instead of purchase, expanding storage space becomes a real challenge when we're trying to use as much of our facility that we have for students. So Norlake cold lockers are really great because they require very little infrastructure upgrade, usually just some electrical. And again, there's options that they make them so they can be put outside of a building instead of inside, which is incredible because then you're not giving up space inside the building. If you've got, just some space on the backside of a building where you could store your freezer or refrigerator and then just bring what you need inside as needed. Cambro makes these amazing go boxes. If you're picking up food from a district or an SFA, say they'll agree to sell you food, but they can't transport it for you. That's been a situation I've been in. These go boxes are a fairly lightweight foam material when empty, and they come in different sizes. They can be used for hot or cold transport. And because they're relatively small, they'll fit in a typical personal use vehicle. If you've just got to run over your district and pick up meals, a couple of these for a small school site is probably sufficient. And they'll stack right on top of each other on a dolly for moving around. We really liked these at a school site where they had to be stored. Meal service delivery happened downstairs, everything happened downstairs, but the only place to store these overnight was upstairs in a classroom closet. And it was easy. The staff could just carry them upstairs, store them, have them picked up the next day. DoD fresh fruit and vegetables really saved us this year when we had short staff and really, struggled with substitutions and cancellations from, places where we procured food. The options for even individually wrapped vegetables that really helped us avoid violating our vegetable subgroups, even with waivers. Really great options I can't say enough about, that even if you're using a vendor, even if you've got really limited options, use your commodity entitlement on this, and it'll make a big difference in your offering and the variety in your program. Y'all, you actually don't have to do this all by yourself if you don't want to. It's a lot. It's overwhelming. There are companies that you can go pay money to help you absorb some of this stress. I do not use any of these companies myself, but I know of at least 4 that service schools in California. Jennifer McNeil at Lunch Assist is often on these listening calls, hanging out, asking questions. School Food and Wellness Group, School Food Solution, and School Nutrition Plus, all of them sell consulting services. And so if you don't have a highly qualified person to help you solve your expansion problems, your startup problems, and you just need to buy a person that can help you do some of these things, there are people you can call and give some money to absorb some of this stress. Not promoting any of them individually, but do know that they are out there. It's very common as charter schools that we're, getting back office services from a company. This is very similar to that. Thanks for hanging out with me. In closing, what do I want to say in closing? It is one of our core values in my network. In addition to our mission and vision, we have core values, and one of them is just start. There are things that we have to do, and there's very little time left to do them. It'll make our type A friends crazy, but progress is better than perfection. If you're starting someplace and you don't feel great about it, at least start, because the longer you do it, the longer you have to improve upon it. So don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Y'all can do this. You just have to eat the elephant one bite at a time. All right, I'll kick it back to Gurjeet.
Thanks so much, Holly. That's great euphemism at the end, right? The elephant of school nutrition programs. Really appreciate a lot of creative solutions, in that presentation. I think, some of the things that really just jumping out to me of, using Medi-Cal LEA funds, to get every dollar of support you can out of the district, that's just a great option. And then, that purchasing some foods and then focusing on the ones that you can procure independently to start, I think is just, another great example of a solution that we see from the local level that, we here at CDE don't always have. So really appreciate you kind of sharing that perspective. And then also the start, the back in fall of 2017, reaching out to Hemet Unified and then taking you on as a site or vending the meals, from Hemet as a way to kind of take that first step into these programs, I think is just, another really good example of getting that start and doing it. So thanks again for sharing your experience. Next, our next panelist is Kristen Hilleman from Capistrano Unified School District. Kristen is passionate about advocating for the nutrition programs and her students in her community, and her goal really is to build an equitable school meal program that aims to increase food access to all students across the district. And I know, Kristen, you've got some experience in supporting some charter schools in your area, so we're really excited to hear about how you've been able to do that successfully. So I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks, Gurjeet. Hello, everybody. I'll start to share my screen here. So Capistrano Unified is in South Orange County. We are a large district. We're the largest in Orange County, probably in top 10 in the state. And so we started in 2018, just courting some of our different charter schools in our district. We have a total of 6 within our district. We feed 4 of them. One is part of our SFA, and then the other, let's see, there we go. Now it's working. And the other 3 we vend to. So as you can see, we have 63 campuses spread out across 200 square miles in 7 cities. So we are quite large, about 42,700 students. And our experience with charter schools started in 2019. So that's when we brought on our first charter as a part of us, part of our school food authority. They happen to be on the district's student information system as well. So we all use Aries, and it was very quickly able to be integrated into the mix. We do both an interagency agreement, and we do just an overall contract that we went through district legal and made sure all of the little nuances of our program are spelled out in there. But like I said, we also do the, probably overkill, but we do the interagency agreement as well. So with a charter school being part of your SFA, you absorb all the duties of that charter school. They just become one of your sites. So you have to add them into your CNIPS listing. You process all their free and reduced applications. You might need an employee to serve meals there, as we do. So we had to hire somebody specifically for that site. We have to get school board approval each year that this charter school wants to continue to work with us. So they've just become one of our school sites within our normal grouping. We follow the same menu for them. They are a K-8, but our elementary menu suffices for that structure. And, so we kind of just run them as we run all of our other sites. It's not too daunting. It's fairly simple to do that. The biggest thing is just making sure that when you're looking at your contract or your interagency agreement, that you have something set financially. So if there's not a whole lot of meals served at that school site, you will be able to be reimbursed to cover your costs. So working with our accountants here in our department, looked at our food cost, our meal costs, any kind of costs for labor, transportation of food, all the same costs that you deal with making sure that each and every one of your normal sites are being supported appropriately. You do the same with that charter. And then we set up a certain threshold. If the charter school served enough meals above and beyond that threshold, then they don't owe us any money. If they, let's say right when the pandemic hit, and they were transitioning between having kids on campus or not, that month of March, they had a little bit of, issue. And so they did not serve as many meals as they needed to break that threshold. So they had to pay us for our services. And then we did a modified contract for the remainder of the pandemic until students were back on campus, because we were still doing some of the administrative duties for the charter school program. So you have to look at those little nuances. And honestly, that with the pandemic, that was something we had to navigate kind of on the spot. So that's really, as Rebecca had stated earlier on, that's how to bring a charter into your SFA if you are a school district SFA and are looking for additional meals, or if you have a charter contact you and they're able to work with you in that capacity and you're willing to take them on in that capacity. Our other charters, we vend meals to them. We do a little bit of consulting with them as well, just to help them along. They do, I believe, have consulting groups that they work with as well, but we do the menu planning for them. And we have set them up under our system for production sheets so they can place their orders through us for all their meals, and they can see the breakdown of their menus. We do a similar contract on an annual basis with the charters that we vend to. It is also board approved. However, we do not do that same kind of situation with our SFA charter where we have that threshold. So these charter schools that we vend to, they pay us per meal that they order, not that they serve, but that they order. So that's why we decided to bring them into our production system. We use Healthy Meal Planner, and it's just an online system. They're able to go in and plug in their numbers based on their forecasts and what have you. Most of them do have families place orders a week or two in advance, and then they're able to put their production numbers in for us. And so we then deliver meals, hot meals, to these charter schools on a daily basis out of our central kitchen. So we brought on another driver into our mix, and that driver breaks his route up to come back to the central kitchen to pick up the meals and then deliver them hot to those charter schools. Luckily, they're on the same site. They share a site within our district, which makes it very user-friendly for us. And so with that vended meal cost, we add in of course, the meal cost, as well as any labor on our end, administrative fees, and transportation fees. So it is a little higher than, you know, what our other charter would pay, but it covers all the costs for us. And we bill them on a monthly basis based on the number of meals ordered. With those vended charters, it can be fairly easy, I would say, just because you are, in essence, just dropping off the meals. You don't necessarily have to get involved in all the day-to-day activities of what's going on. However, like I said, we try to be a good resource to our partners and make sure that if they have any questions about the program, or if we see something that doesn't look quite right, we'll guide them in the right direction, because they are somewhat new to this, and we want to make sure that they're doing the best they can possibly do, because they get audited just like we do. So just trying to be good partners with our charters. One of our vended charters is a middle school, high school combination, and we have a continuation high school that has one employee that does some transporting of meals. So that individual takes care of our secondary charter. And similar to how we run it from our central kitchen, they prepare all the meals on a middle school site, and then they transport those meals hot over to that secondary charter. So these are kind of some examples of what we have as far as our school meals agreement. It's very similar. That's on the left-hand side of your screen. It's very similar for most of our charters. Some of the verbiage is tweaked if for the one that's the SFA or under us as the SFA, and for those others that are vending, the meals are vending. So we just use very similar verbiage. We've cleared it with district legal. This is what goes to board on an annual basis. And then the interagency agreement sample is on the right-hand side of your screen, and that is what can be pulled down from CNIPS. And that is a very simplistic, straightforward, you fill it out, you're covered piece of, you know, greatness for you to utilize. So really the benefits to us as a school district are we're feeding more children. We're feeding more children within our community. So we have more meals to claim as an SFA. We have shown program growth. And for those meals that we're vending, we're seeing increased revenue coming in. Community engagement, we have families from all of our different charter schools contacting us, asking us questions, understanding why we can't do some of the things that they think we should be able to do. You know, maybe it's kitchen infrastructure, maybe it's questions about special diets, and they're concerned about something, but we are able to make changes and work with their charters to show them that those are pieces of our program we're able to add into the mix. And then increased entitlement dollars coming into our program. So adding that one school site in under us as an SFA, we've received increased entitlement. And then also we work with our vended charters, and they either share their entitlement with us and we reimburse them. We use that to get more DOD if they don't want to use those funds themselves. So there's a lot of different options out there. It can be daunting. It can be a little scary at first, but really it's just building your program. And, you know, like Holly said, you just take it one bite at a time. It's incredibly good to continue to add on and spread the information about what we do. There's so many questions and unknowns to people outside of our world. So, the more community engagement, the better. This is my information. If you have any questions, if you want some samples of contracts, I reached out to my fellow colleagues and asked, hey, who's done this before? And I just started receiving quite a few different sample contracts from colleagues, and went to district legal here and showed them all the samples, and we conglomerated some together and came up with something that worked for us as a district, us as an SFA, and our charters. So I would suggest reaching out to your colleagues, myself, and just seeing what you can come up with. It's everything we do is something new every day. So that's what makes our job so awesome. It's not monotonous. You just kind of got to roll with it, go with the flow. So thank you guys very much. Hope that all made sense.
Thanks, Kristen. That was really such a well-rounded example of how an existing school district can really support, the growth of universal meals in California. I mean, doing both, taking on sites under your own administration, and also then, giving them the option to, hey, we can also just vend the meals to you. I mean, I think that just really kind of displays, both options that are available to folks. I think one of the things that really stood out to me, and I heard it a couple times in your presentation, was working with the board, and so would you mind kind of expanding on that? How did you get your board to buy off on, hey, I want to take on a charter school underneath my administration, or hey, I want to be able to vend meals to a charter? Were those difficult conversations, or how did you tackle those?
No, they really weren't difficult. I spoke with my boss, who at the time was our deputy superintendent, and just shared with him what I felt the benefits were going to be for our program and for the charter as well. As I said, they're all integrated into our district, so we want them to be successful since they're part of us in a sense. And just, I had received a lot of feedback from some parents at different charters, and they were sharing different things with me. I'm sorry, I can't do anything because we don't vend or provide meals for your charter. So sharing the different stories with your boss, with your district. And then I think the best thing that I did was work closely with our district legal folks to make sure that our contracts were as all encompassing of the needs of our program as well as the charter program. And I would have the charters, and still do now, have them take the contract to their board first before I took it to our board, so we can ensure that they were good with everything that's in that contract before it even got close to going to our school board. And really, there was never a conversation from the board per se. Every once in a while there were questions, but nothing earth-shattering. It was more like just clarification on, what do you mean by an elementary meal, or why, that simple things.
That's great. Yeah, I think just, highlighting that it takes community sometimes to come together, and that, there is a role for, that executive leadership and the board. And I think bringing them in and over communicating that kind of stuff is probably, gets them in your corner, because ultimately everybody wants to feed more kids, right? So, so thanks again, Kristen. Really appreciate you sharing your experiences. We're going to next kind of transition back into some frequently asked questions that we have received. I know we've had a pretty busy time in the Q&A today. I do want to encourage folks, if there's a question that you've submitted that you didn't feel like was fully answered, or you had a a really unique situation, you can always submit those questions to our Universal Meals inbox. It's on your screen there, Universal Meals, that's plural, sy22@cde.ca.gov. And we really do use that as we develop our frequently asked questions, and as, of course, we're working towards developing formal guidance around universal meals. So I'll jump in. I'm going to cover some of the common questions that we've received over the last couple months, and I'll highlight a few that came up in today's chat, and then just I'll finish up with some clarifications at the end. So this first question: when does the universal meal mandate begin? We've gone a little back and forth on this, so I understand why there's been a little bit of confusion. But the universal meals mandate that mandates that you provide both a breakfast and a lunch to all students that request one starts with your 22-23 school year. So, if the first day of your new school year in the fall is, say, August 15th, that is the day that your agency will be required to provide those 2 meals each school day. So it is, it's going to depend a little bit from district to district and maybe even site to site, but it's when the new school year at your school begins. That leads us into the next question that we've also gotten. Does this mean that, do we have to start serving 2 meals in summer school in 2021? And the answer to that question is no. So again, and just like that previous question, when that 22-23 school year begins is when you'll be expected to provide both that breakfast and that lunch. If your school is operating a summer session that starts, let's say in June or even in July, the current state meal mandate of 1 nutritionally adequate meal would apply in those instances. Another question that we've received, and I think part of this was related to some of the pushing that we did around best practices with school breakfast programs, is does the universal meal program require that breakfast be offered to students in the classroom or after the bell? And the clear answer is no. The universal meals program states that breakfast must be offered, but it does not mandate the breakfast model that an LEA utilizes. So, it's really up to local school operators to choose which breakfast model best fits your school site's needs. You could use breakfast after the bell and breakfast in the classroom. We recommend those as best practices because the data shows that under those models, school breakfast participation increases. But if you want, if the before the bell traditional breakfast model is what fits best for your school, that would very well indeed meet the intent of the California Universal Meals Program. The next question we have is, so if an LEA does not qualify for CEP, do we continue to collect applications and establish eligibility? And the simple answer to this is yes. So all the same requirements for eligibility remain in play. Remember that, when we started, and we've been trying to emphasize this, the California Universal Meal Program is designed to supplement the federal school nutrition programs. It does not replace them. So, all of the requirements around collecting household meal applications, establishing eligibility, sending eligibility letters, conducting verification, for those sites that do not move to a federal feeding provision, all of those requirements still do apply. So I think this question is based around the second pillar. Universal Meals does encourage high needy schools to go to a federal provision. It mandates that they go to a federal provision. You can choose which one that you go to, but for those schools that don't meet that minimum eligibility threshold, then all of those normal standard counting and claiming procedures will remain in play under Universal Meals. So question 5. So this is another one that we've received, schools asking, under Universal Meals, are we still going to be able to sell a la carte items once, Universal Meals launch? And again, the answer to this is yes. Universal Meals does not prohibit the sale of a la carte items. So LEAs are still allowed to serve those a la carte items, but of course they still do need to meet, the competitive food requirements that are established by state and federal laws. we should note that, those a la carte items, they're not going to be eligible for any universal meals reimbursement, but LEAs will be allowed to sell them. Question 6, so can breakfast or lunch be sent home with students? And it's we've been living in a world of USDA waivers for over 2 years now, and so under those existing waivers, that is allowed. However, we don't have any guidance from USDA on if this is going to be allowed to continue in the upcoming school year. So, assuming that we transition back to normal operations, meals will have to be consumed on campus. If a non-congregate USDA waiver is approved, we will certainly be the first ones to be shouting it from the rooftops. Next question has to deal with second meals. So we have heard from some LEAs, sometimes students will request a second meal, and so LEAs under universal meals will be allowed to sell a complete second meal. That second meal is going to have to meet the USDA meal pattern requirements. And under universal meals, there would not be any additional reimbursement for the second meal. We do have a management bulletin on this, and we'll go ahead and drop that into the chat that has a little bit more information about second meals and charging and how that is handled. Traditional kindergarten. So for those traditional kindergarten and preschool students that are at the same site, are LEAs required to give those students a different meal pattern, or is there any flexibility related to that? And there may be some flexibility if the students are being served in the same service area and at the same time. So California Ed Code does define TK as the first year of a 2-year kinder program, and so typically we do consider those children as part of the K through 12 school system. And as part of that K through 12, they're not required to be served the preschool meal pattern, and can instead be served the same meal pattern as their kindergarten students. So, the NSLP school breakfast K through 5. The USDA does give some flexibility in the meal pattern requirements if preschool students are commingled with older students in the meal service area. And so we do spell this out in our preschool meal pattern requirements for schools management bulletin. It's really, it's important to serve age appropriate meals, but the USDA recognized that when schools are serving preschool at the same time as older children, that commingling piece, providing 2 different meal patterns, it can be really challenging. So the final rule gives some flexibility for schools to use one menu when preschoolers and kindergartners are in the same area at the same time. The next question we have relates to, schools that we would typically consider low poverty, or schools that don't have high percentages of free and reduced price students. Will those schools still receive supplemental state meal reimbursement under universal meals? And the answer is yes. The legislature was very clear. There is no minimum free and reduced price requirement in order to be eligible for the additional state funds for universal meals. Simply put, you have to operate both the federal school breakfast program and the federal national school lunch program. If you're operating both of those, then you will be eligible for the universal meals funds. There's not a minimum standard, and I think this question also relates to that second pillar of universal meals, of the mandate for high needy schools to apply for a federal feeding provision. Even if you don't meet that threshold, you are still eligible for universal meals, and you are eligible for the funding. Question 10, and I think the last frequently asked question that we have, at least as part of our presentation today, is, can low poverty schools opt out of the universal meals program? And simply put, there's not a requirement for local education agencies to participate in the federal national school lunch or school breakfast program, but the Ed Code is very clear. It states that public school districts, county offices of education, and charter schools must provide a breakfast and lunch every school day to all students that request one, and that is regardless of that child's eligibility. So, you know, the mandate is not that you go to the federal program, but if you want to receive the additional state meal reimbursement, you will have to be on the federal program and offer both meals in order to be eligible to receive reimbursements. And before we, so I did want to just address just two kind of the themes that I saw in the Q&A today during today's presentation. So first piece I want to just, and I think I've emphasized this a couple times now, but I feel like it's worth repeating. The California Universal Meals Program is a supplement to the federal school nutrition programs. So as a result, there's not a, there won't be a separate universal meals application process. The program is really designed to encourage local program operators to apply and participate in the federal programs, and then that is what triggers the additional state reimbursements to cover the additional cost of universal meals. And in that vein, because it is a supplement to the federal programs, all of those federal program requirements do remain in play. So I think what a common example we had earlier was the question about meal applications. There will still need to be point of service meal counts taken. All of the federal requirements will still apply. The added caveat is that the additional there will be additional reimbursement that's made available to cover the cost of the reduced price meals and the paid meals that previously schools may have been collecting payment for from families. So just to jump back into the PowerPoint, so we do have two upcoming sessions that are scheduled. The first one I want to point out, our next Universal Meals listening session, we just did tweak the date. It will be on Tuesday, April 19th at 2 p.m. And in that session, we're actually going to be covering alternative income forms and the local control funding formula. So we've I know we're approaching the start of a new school year. We've had a lot of questions on the nutrition side around these alternative income forms. So we'll spend a little bit of time doing a refresher on what meal applications look like and the requirements there. But we will have folks from our LCFF office come speak about the requirements for alternative income forms for schools that are able to continue to use them as we go into universal meals, and that would be those who go to a federal feeding provision. And then our May session will be held on May 10th, and we're still working on exactly what the topic for that session will be. Keep an eye out. We'll be sending a listserv for the April session coming up here shortly. The other question that we saw quite a bit in the chat was a request for the presentation. We do record all of our sessions, and they all do get posted to our CDE webpage, our Nutrition What's New page. But I just want to give the heads up, it does take us about 4 weeks to get those posted because we do have to make sure they're 508 accessible, and that includes a full transcript of every word that is spoken during these sessions. One last update before we send you guys off for the afternoon is our CalPads is going to be undergoing some maintenance at the end of this month. We anticipate that CalPads will be down March 31st through April 1st. We bring this up because that is April 1st is that magic date for CEP eligibility. So make sure you're planning accordingly. If your CalPads administrator logs on April 1st and sees that CalPads is down, it's not a bad April Fool's joke. It really is undergoing some maintenance, but please don't stress. You'll still be able to pull the direct certification data from CalPads. It should be available and online by April 7th. And the data that you pull on the 7th will reflect the direct certification figures as of April 1st. So if you have any questions there, you can reach out to our CalPads office, but I do believe they sent out a communication to CalPads administrators. So folks should be pretty broadly aware of this maintenance piece. So, again, thank you guys, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to our panelists for sharing that local perspective. If you have questions, thoughts, and feedback for sessions that you'd like to see us, or topics you'd like for us to cover in future Universal Meals sessions, you can submit those questions to our Universal Meals inbox. It's up on your screen there. Universal Meals, that's plural, SY22 at cde.ca.gov. We'll have our team drop a link to that in the chat for you as well. But thank you all for listening today, and hope that you enjoy the rest of your National School Breakfast Week, and the rest of International Women's Day. So thank you, everybody.